All right. So, with today's agenda, we are going to be talking about the what's and the whys of collaborations, how to promote collaborations in a digital environment. And then we're also going to talk about ways that we can collaborate while using Canvas. We're going to be discussing discussions. We're going to talk about groups, collaborations, and also utilizing pages for collaboration. So, what is collaboration? When we think about collaboration, some people think that it means cooperation, and collaboration is not cooperation. Collaboration requires working with specific intent. It's an agreement on a common purpose or a goal and finding a common way to achieve that goal. There's a great article that talks about collaboration and that the power of a group is social capital. It's something that builds on the talents of all the different individuals and pulls it all together to create that common goal. When we think of this in terms of our Canvas courses, obviously our group is our students. So we need to strive to provide them the opportunity for collaboration in our courses. And we want to pull in all those different learning styles and experiences that our students come with. So collaboration is not really a one size fits all, but rather numerous opportunities that we can use to approach this. And I already let you know that I taught fifth grade for 20 years. So my last 5 years in the classroom, I did get to utilize Canvas. And my fifth graders were completing collaborative projects with inside of Canvas and working within collaborative groups. So, this is anywhere down as 10 years old. I've seen this used in third grade classrooms as well. So yes, if given the proper guidance and if you are facilitating the collaborations, this could be a positive learning experience for our students, because I know when I think about collaborative projects that I had to experience in my educational career, not all of them were very positive. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and how we can limit those barriers so our students don't experience those bad collaborative projects. Anyway, when we talk about collaboration, we know that individuals learn from each other and that organizations as a whole benefit from working collaboratively. However, like I just said, collaborations are not really utilized or put into practice as much as we would like. When we think about collaborations within Canvas, we look not just at the teacher to student interactions, but also student to student interactions and student to content interactions. So we're going to get many different opportunities to approach this. We can deliver traditional methods like assignments and quizzes and pages, but we need to try to consider how we can incorporate collaboration. I know when first given instruction on how to create collaborations within Canvas, I started thinking of some of the projects that I was already doing with my students and then deciding if I could do them with digital collaborations. And like I just shared with you, my students took off with it and they loved working in that collaborative spot within Canvas. But yes, it takes some guidance, it takes some facilitation. And of course, the students are going to need instruction on how to make this successful along the way. We want to avoid repeating errors with ineffective practice. So if you've ever worked in a let's just say it wasn't a friendly collaborative environment, we all know that there's some bumps in the road when you assign collaborative groups. You may have that one person that is that leader, so they want to take over and manipulate the group, but you also may have some of those users that decide to take the back seat and they don't participate in the group. So we all know what this can look like, but what can we do as instructors to limit those bumps in the roads and those barriers? And one of the first things we have to do is consider them when planning our collaborations and our learning activities. So why collaborations? We want to make sure that when we incorporate collaboration, it's one of those fundamental approaches to effective pedagogy and education. Collaborative learning potentially promotes really deep learning in which students are going to be able to engage in that high quality social interaction. And this is something that helps our learners take charge of that learning process and just become more engaged with not just the content, but with their peers as well. And we know that even the jobs that you hold today and the job that I'm working right now, collaboration is inevitable. It is a desirable skill that employers usually want our students to have when they leave our institutions so that they go on to, jobs or even into whatever workforce they go into. But the skills are necessary in the workplace. And, I used to have students that tell me that they hated working collaboratively. And I used to tell them that, listen, life is a collaboration. You are going to need to learn this skill. So it's our responsibility to incorporate just those opportunities in our courses so that we are preparing our students. So I just want to get some feedback from you right now. Like, what type of collaborations are you currently utilizing in your classrooms, if any? And it doesn't necessarily have to be using Canvas. If you haven't taken that next step into using collaborations within Canvas, what other collaborative learning opportunities have you used with your students so that they're working together? It doesn't necessarily have to be face-to-face. It could be in the online environment, but feel free to either unmute yourself or you can type directly into the chat. But what does collaboration currently look like in your classroom?
Well, one thing I do a lot is peer review.
Okay, great.
Paper. I don't know if you would call that a collaboration, but if they're doing a paper, I have them peer review each other's papers first, and usually I do that in discussion.
Excellent. And we're not going to tap into it so much in this presentation, but yes, Canvas allows for digital peer reviews.
Oh, and that too. Yeah, I haven't actually used that tool yet.
Great feature. I used to use it with my students, but all the students have to submit their paper, and then you choose as the instructor if you want them to have anonymous peer reviews or if you strategically pair the students up together. Mm-hmm. And then they get to offer annotative feedback on each other's documents, any file upload within SpeedGrader. And then you, of course, as the instructor, get to see that feedback as well. So awesome. Love peer reviews, but that's also one of those skills we have to teach them, how to properly peer review each other. Anybody else want to share? Nasheen, go ahead. I see your hand up.
Okay, thank you. I have never used the peer review option for anything, but I'm just curious to what Chad was saying, and you as well. How does that work? How do the students receive it? Because they're so strapped for time that they're taking other courses. A lot of them are working.
Of course.
So how do they receive this add-on responsibility?
So, I used to build it into my expectations. So I'm not going to double up on what I'm expecting out of them if I'm expecting them to do some peer reviewing, because I'm not asking them to do my grading work. I'm doing this because it is a skill that they need to learn as well, because reading another student's essays or reports or whatnot gives that student, as the peer reviewer, that much more exposure to writing as well. So it's a process, but you just have to build in that time. They receive it within Canvas, and once they submit, they don't just get a peer review until they've submitted their file upload. And then within there, they can get the annotation tools. And of course, this requires facilitation and guidance, but you're going to tell them exactly what they need to be marking on the papers. And then it also opens up the room for so much, just dialogue about the writing process and what we can do better and how we can improve this. And especially when it's something like essays and writing, it is a process. So I like to give them the opportunity to resubmit, and then you can see their first submission with the annotations, and then you can see their next submission with the annotations. So yes, it is a process, and I know time is always against us, but I used to just build it in. I wouldn't give them additional work. I would give them the time to be able to peer review each other. I see that somebody else is doing group assignments and discussion boards where students respond to threads. And yes, we're going to talk about some discussions and some considerations for doing collaborative discussions. I'll share with you one of the projects I always used to do with my fifth graders. It was part of our curriculum, is I used to have to teach the human body systems. When I first started teaching fifth grade, of course, it was like poster board, and they would come up with these presentations on their assigned body system. And then once we got Microsoft Office 365, I had them doing collaborative PowerPoints. But once I got Canvas and I could do collaborations within Canvas, I took it to that next step. And the beauty behind doing it in Canvas is I was able to build that rubric. So there was no question what those student groups had to accomplish during their collaborative project, because everything was just spelled out right there for them within the rubric. And you get to choose, if it's a collaborative project, that am I going to give the same group grade to everybody in the group, or am I going to grade each person individually? And sometimes I have them grade each other on how they participated in the group using a rubric as well. So we're going to dive in and start talking about the different tools within Canvas that we'll be able to use to facilitate these different types of collaborations. But thank you to all of you that shared any type of collaborative projects that you are currently using with your class. So next is working together in a digital world. And when we think about working together in a digital world, group work is one of those effective methods that can be utilized to help students develop those key critical thinking, communication, and decision-making skills. However, it is going to require careful planning and facilitation on our part. As we previously mentioned, group work can be really frustrating. Those individuals that like to take over the group. And then sometimes people just aren't people. They don't like working with others. They would rather work alone. But we know in the workforce, you don't always get those options. So it is a skill that we do want to teach our students, but we also don't want them to come out of it with this negative view of group work. Like I shared with you, I still have from my graduate school days. I hated doing any type of group work. I felt like I was always carrying the weight of the group. So we need to consider that when we are planning for these types of collaborations. We need to think about how to approach all those different situations within Canvas. When we create groups and collaborations, we can decide who goes into each group. That's one of the functions within creating groups and group sets. So I used to know which one of my students work well with each other. So you can specifically manipulate them and put them into the groups. Or if you are willing to take that chance, you can have the students put themselves into a group. And then you also get to assign group leaders within Canvas. And once we start talking about the groups, you'll see that those were all turned on. All right. Sorry about that. Like I said, I used to tell my students, group work is inevitable. Life is one big group project, so you better get used to it now. But as instructors, we need to help nurture this process. How can we use Canvas to promote collaborations? So when facilitating group work, we can assign roles in some cases, like I just said. When we put them into those groups, I can have a group leader. I always used to do like book studies with my students, and one person would be the group leader, and the next person would be the secretary, and then I had another person who was the illustrator. Giving roles tends to help when putting them into group assignments as well. We talked a little bit about peer reviews, but just a pivotal point about giving feedback to their peers is you are going to have to model that. You might want to do one as a whole group so that they see exactly what is expected of them when doing peer reviews, and also providing rubrics. If you provide a rubric for the specific essay or report that the students are going to be peer reviewing, then the students also get to grade each other, not only using just the annotation tools, but they get to use the rubrics for grading as well. And if you allow multiple submissions, then it's not a one and done, it's a process. So then the students can resubmit once they get their reviews and they can make all those edits. And like I said, you get to see the writing process because you'll get to see each one of the submissions with the different edits on it. But we need to structure these collaborations in a meaningful way because the ultimate goal is we want to meet as many different learning styles that we have in our classroom. And like I said, not everybody is keen on doing group work, but Canvas definitely allows us to meet those needs. And it doesn't necessarily have to be all online. It could be like a hybrid type of situation where we can utilize discussions, collaborations, groups, and I'm going to be talking more about those right now. So the first one we are going to talk about is creating discussions within Canvas. So I'm sure you guys have dabbled in those a little bit. And there's so many settings with the discussions. You can decide on having threaded responses. You can decide on adding a rubric to them. I always used to have my students, respond to at least 2 or 3 of their peers. Some of my discussions were ongoing. They weren't just over one specific topic, but they were things that we would use in the classroom. And if students subscribe to the discussion, they'll be able to see every time somebody actually posts into that discussion. So with discussions, we all know what they are, but they are an awesome way to get that higher level of engagement. And, research has shown us that students engage more in virtual discussions versus classroom discussions. I always think about a specific student that I had in my class that never really spoke up in class. However, when given that digital discussion platform, I got the best discussion responses from that student. I don't know if it was just because they were shy and didn't want to speak, but it could also be their processing style. There are individuals who like to take their time and think about things before actually speaking out. And those digital discussions allow for that. And so, the students could potentially just add their response and then they can think about it. I know that's what I do if I'm laying down at night and things are going through my head, then they can go back and actually edit or add to their discussion response because now they've had more time to think about it. And there's also the ability to track participation and then provide specific student feedback. And you can't necessarily do that face to face. If you're asking a specific discussion question in class and a student responds, you're not going to be able to stop your entire, discussion to give that student specific feedback on what their thought process was about that specific prompt. But we also want to make sure that the student feedback is not necessarily private, but it's connected to what they're thinking. And that's where the rubrics within the discussions are very handy. And with discussions in Canvas, they don't necessarily have to be graded. They could be non-graded discussions. Like I just told you, I used to run one and I have an example of it. I'll show you, but it was called a wisdom wall. And so it was where students could actually respond to each other versus always coming to me to get the answers. And it ended up being very useful in the classroom. It could be things like in the evenings, they'd be like, I didn't get what our math assignment was. Does anyone know what we were supposed to do? So now they're answering each other's questions. And it wasn't just with things in class, it was for clarity on specific problems, or if we had a specific discussion prompt, they would ask for clarity in the wisdom wall. So we'll take a look at that in just a second. Students also get the choice on how they want to respond, which is great because we know that students have, some of them just have some certain learning styles where versus wanting to type out a response, they can use the rich content editor to record themselves. Now, I know when I was in the classroom, Flipgrid had just come out and my students loved it. And so I used to use that in my classroom. Yes, there's an LTI into Canvas where they can still use Flipgrid, but I was utilizing Canvas discussions using videos versus using text. And when I would give the prompt, I would not type it out. I would record myself. So now I'm modeling exactly what I want to see them do. So I like giving the multiple ways for students to interact with the information. So they could type their response if they felt more comfortable, or they could also record themselves if they felt more comfortable. And like I said, one of the best parts about this is they can refine their thoughts. Maybe after reading some of their peers' responses, it may have changed their perspective on your specific prompt. So then they can see an alternative view and then respond to that as well. Love this infographic on discussions. Yes, it strengthens connections. It allows for that student voice. It allows for that thoughtful feedback from us as facilitators, also from their peers. Efficiency, love the rubrics, love the speed grader, and accountability. When you allow for discussions and you have threaded responses, or if you tell your students, I'm going to need you to respond to 2 or 3 of your peers, when you go into SpeedGrader, you see each individual student's initial prompt, and then you see all of their other prompts or responses to their peers. So you don't have to like go looking through the thread to see where else Adam responded to another peer. Everything is going to be right there in SpeedGrader, and I can see exactly what Adam said in the entire discussion post. So it's very organized. Love using discussions, because when they're organized and designed well, they really do foster that student engagement. Discussions can also be a great place to provide collaboration and community. I just told you I used to use it for a wisdom wall in my class, and the wisdom wall would run for the entire semester and it would just build upon itself. And it was funny because they would tell each other, like, I just answered that yesterday. Go back in the thread and you'll find the answer to that. So I knew that they were constantly reading the wisdom wall, even if it wasn't something that they asked within the wisdom wall. So discussions can be a wonderful tool. It's also great for social and emotional learning as well. Students, I already mentioned, they have a choice on how they can respond, which is great. I love watching the recordings of themselves. And discussions usually support all learners because of the multiple ways for students to interact with that information. They can extend their learning past the classroom time frame. So all around, just a great tool. Some considerations. When it comes to discussions, you want to use discussions that allow students to collaborate and answer different questions so that your discussion boards have multiple approaches. It could be, a discussion for a specific unit or a specific topic or chapter. I used to use them for like book talks as well. And it allows them to express their thoughts and then also kind of answer each other's questions. We already mentioned incorporating videos. I think using videos and discussions is a great way to provide that social interaction, especially if it's a completely online course. You definitely need to set up discussion norms. I remember the first time I created a discussion with my students, I was getting things like, yep, I agree with Chad. And they didn't really know how to express their thoughts. So I had to model it. What exactly do you agree with that Chad had said in his response? So they had to learn the process of discussing properly. You want to model that. And then you also have to like kind of teach them how to approach their comments. Like I said, if we just leave it up to them, they're just going to say, yeah, I agree with that. Now, my kids were pretty slick. I taught high achieving 5th grade. So I would allow for them to edit their discussion posts. It's a setting within the discussion. They got real slick. So what they would do is type one little period. And once they've responded to the discussion post, now they can see everybody else's. So one period now allows them to see the whole thread of the rest of the class, but then they can go back in and they can edit their response. So we had to talk about all these norms and what the whole like, why am I doing discussions in the class? What skill am I trying to provide you guys with? Yes, there's a loophole and you guys found it, but I'm really trying to provide you guys with these good collaborative discussion skills. So some things that I used to use it for were student presentations. I used to have a thing called Real Talk, and that's where they would be able to express how they felt about certain topics that were a little touchy in class. Sometimes I would use it for icebreakers when I was running adult professional development. And I already told you about my wisdom wall, so I'll show you kind of what that looked like. It's where the students can ask questions to the rest of the class. This is a discussion and it serves as like peer-to-peer support. And like I said, they can come in here and subscribe to a discussion. And when they subscribe to it, they're going to see anytime somebody posts within that discussion. They ask for homework help sometimes. They find out when assignments are due. They find out where to locate specific resources. So I wasn't really the person answering a lot of these questions. They were using this with each other. And it also taught them that valuable skill of how to have dialogue with each other in a proper manner. This was another example that I loved. And this comes to us from Jennifer Gonzalez. She runs a website called The Cult of Pedagogy. And she had this article, Philosophical Chairs, and you guys will get a copy of the slide deck, so you guys will get all the resources. But it was a different discussion technique. And I never really thought about this. If I was back in the classroom, I would definitely be using this. So basically the way it's run is it starts off with a prompt, but then the prompt either has an agree or a disagree. And then the students will respond in the specific thread if they agree or if they don't agree. And then after reading each other's responses, they may change their entire viewpoint on a specific topic. So I actually tried to find an example, of what this would look like. And I didn't pull it up, but within your discussion, you could start it with just a simple agree and then a simple disagree. And then the students would continue with those threads. And then as you look at that discussion, like I said, you're going to see the thread of why people agree with that specific prompt. And then you'll see the thread of why people do not agree with that specific prompt. So definitely an interesting way to use discussions inside of Canvas. So now I just want to hear from you. What are some ways that you have utilized discussions or maybe now plan on using discussions in your classroom? You can feel free to unmute yourself, or you can, of course, write in the chat. I am definitely going to invite you guys to try to utilize discussions. You know, you have access to Canvas Commons as well, so you're not reinventing this wheel. Teachers have been using Canvas now for upwards of 7-8 years. So you can search for discussions within Canvas Commons. And I'm actually going to show you a wiki page that someone used kind of like a discussion. And I found it right in Canvas Commons. I did not create this. So utilize your resources. You don't want to start everything off from scratch. But if no one wants to share discussions, we will move on to collaborations. All right, so with collaborations are where students are now going to be able to work together on a specific document or a PowerPoint. It depends on what your institution has. You're either a Google institution or you're a Microsoft Office 365 institution. So according to what you have, those are the different types of collaborations you will be able to create within your course. It's a great tool. Like I said, when we first got Office 365 and I sat there and watched Office 365 change through the years. So at first you couldn't collaborate on things, but then once it became collaborative, I would put my students in groups and I would call one of them the party planner. And then it was the party planner's responsibility to make the PowerPoint. And then they would pass their little computer around and the other students would put in their student numbers. So now they all have access to that same PowerPoint. Now they don't have to be huddled around one computer. They could be spread out in the classroom. They all are collaborating on the same PowerPoint. These types of collaborations are created right within Canvas. Like I said, depending on whether or not your institution uses Google or Office, those are the types of collaborations you will be able to enable within your course. You can start them as the instructor, or the students can start them, like I just said. If I was starting them, I used to do one on like book talks, but what I would do with that is I had a template. So I would go in and I would show them how to do, or I would put the template in. Yes, I will certainly walk you through it. So collaborations lives right in your courses. Now, I'm also going to show you another step in just a moment. I am going to be showing you how to make groups, because what I used to do first is I would make a group and then I would have my groups create the collaboration. Sometimes I would make them if I had a template, but other times I would have the students make it. So I'm going to show you all of them together. Nasheen, when I get to it, I want to start with the groups and then we'll go back to creating collaborations, but I just wanted to kind of talk our way through them first. But collaborations lives right here. And I can say that we are going to be using a specific collaboration. In this case, it's Google Docs. They would have to authorize their account one time, and then I would be able to build them in here. But I'm going to show you a different way in just a second. So some considerations with collaborations is if you're choosing to do them, like I just said, they could start off blank, or you can start off with a template. I used to start with a template when I had my students doing the human body systems. I sent it up to Canvas Commons. It lives up in Canvas Commons. So you can search my name and you can find the human body systems. The nicest part about it was the rubric that I created with that assignment. So that is up there, but then the students knew exactly what I was expecting from their collaborative group project. It could be something that runs all semester long. It doesn't necessarily have to be a one-time project. It could be collaborative notes. Maybe you're lecturing and some students are good at taking notes, others are not so good at taking notes. So you could have a collaborative notes for your class. They could be deliverables that you need them to create. So, the opportunities are endless. I used to try not to like stress myself out, like, okay, I just learned collaborations in Canvas, so what am I going to do to use it? I used to say, okay, I've always done this specific group project. Now what can I do to put it into Canvas? So I used to kind of do it the reverse versus stressing myself about if I learned a new tool, I have to use it. Not necessarily the case. With collaborative notes, students could ask questions to each other right there within that collaboration. And you, as the instructor, can always go in and see those collaborations at any time. So you kind of get to spot check, and then you also get to provide feedback. Another thing that we can collaborate on, and not a lot of people realize this, and I personally never used it in the classroom, and I wish I would have, was pages. Within a Canvas page, at the bottom, you have an option. Who can edit on this page? And you can say teachers and students. Now, this is going to take a little training because, like any collaborative page, they can potentially write over top of each other. So you need to let them know that. Maybe have them have it in a file and they're copying it and then pasting it onto the page. So that way, if they lose their work, if somebody else is inputting at the same time. So This is the one where I actually found an awesome collaboration page up in Canvas Commons. This specific teacher, I just pulled it into one of my modules, made a page, called it the Biology of Disease, and allowed for all the students to be able to edit on the page. Notice at the top, she did give some examples. This is in Canvas Commons. If this is something that you're interested in, you can just go grab it. It tells them you'll be adding information about your chosen saying right here. Just add yours to the end. Feel free to get a little elaborate. This is basic. You could add pictures and videos. And then it tells them, either take a screenshot of your submission or save it in a Word file in case it disappears. Like I said, if somebody else is editing at the same time, we can go to the version history of the page and recover it, but things happen. And I can't see exactly, I mean, I can see the version history and who the last person was that edited on the page, but I'm not going to know if they deleted a specific thing. This does take a little teacher training. I remember I had colleagues that would tell me that they would not even attempt doing collaborative projects with their students because then the students would delete each other's work. My students weren't like that. We established an environment in our classroom where they were promoting each other and lifting each other up. They weren't trying to kibosh each other and delete each other's work. So it does take some facilitation. But you'll see here what the students did is they were finding their disease or their saying to a disease and then adding it in. So does coffee really stunt your growth? Here's that research that student found, a couple of images, their sources. Lemon water for morning sickness, does it really work? So each student got to come into this wiki page and add their own part of the saying of diseases. And then it's kind of nice because everything's in one place. And then they could just go through here and see all of it, and they could see what their peers found. Yes, very similar to discussions, but it doesn't require that responding to each other. It's just a good place to kind of keep everything in one place and have them work together on one specific task. The next thing we're going to talk about is creating groups. And like I said, I would do this step first before creating the collaboration for my students or before allowing them to create the collaboration for themselves. And I will definitely model how to do this. I just want to kind of talk my way through it first. So when we create a group, it almost provides the students like their own little mini Canvas course, and they will find their group within the blue glow or within the global navigation. And they'll have a little button that says groups. When they go in there, they'll be able to see any of the groups that they have been added to. I know they've got multiple teachers. So when creating your groups, just a word of the wise, don't call them group 1 and group 2 and group 3. Because if they have 5 teachers and each teacher calls it group 1 and group 2 and group 3, they're not going to be able to decipher between their groups. I used to call it by the specific topic or subject. So if it was, planets, it was planets Mars group. If it was the human body systems, it was the circulatory system group. So they knew exactly what their group job or title was. So when we do this, it is done within the People tab, and we will first create what we call a group set. Essentially, the group set is the project title. So if it was the human body systems or the planets or whatever it is that you're doing, you would name the group set by that title, and then you create the groups within. And so I'm going to just dive in right now. And I see that Janice is also asking for a walkthrough of discussions. Yeah, sure thing. So let me back up and do that real quick. I'm just going to dive into a module. I was just trying to give you some ideas on how to use discussions. This really wasn't the how-tos of creating, but I could easily show you how to do it. So I'm just within a module right now. So I'm just going to hit the plus, and it automatically defaults me to the last thing I created, which happened to be an assignment, but I'm going to scroll down to discussion. And it looks like I already have some discussions in this course, but I'm just going to create a new topic and I'm just going to call it demo. And then I'm going to add items. So all it does is add my placeholder for the discussion right in my module. I click on that. And now I will be able to edit. I'm going to click on the dots, hit edit. And then this is where I would be putting my actual post. Now, when I do this, I like to use like just different like visually appealing things so my students know. So I might say right here is the prompt. And oops, if I could spell today. And then I would type out the prompt. And then I might do something like insert a horizontal line. And then here I might give them the guidelines. Maybe they need to respond in 200 words or more. And I need to spell this out because like I said, if you don't do this, they're going to give you 2 words and be done. They get better at discussions the more you use them in class. I might even have another line and I might do something like technical support if they need any help with things. So I type out my prompt. I come on down. Of course, I have some options, you know, if I want students to be able to reveal their names or profile pictures, I get to decide if it's going to be anonymous or not. Students must post before seeing other people's responses. Well, remember I told you they found a loophole on that one, but I am going to enable that. I'm going to say that this is going to be graded. If I do not check this graded box, I am not going to get the ability to create a rubric for this specific discussion. Allow liking, that's almost like social media. They can like each other's responses. I kind of stay away from that. I'm not going to get into like groups and whatnot right now with the group discussion, but if I already created my groups, which I'm about to show you how to do, I can say that this is a group discussion and then each specific group members will have their own discussion within. Available point, how many points it's worth, display, this is if I want to sync it to my SIS, all of that. But when I hit save, now when we make an assignment, the assignments are very intuitive to add a rubric. It lives right down here and it's a plus sign plus rubric. But when I make a discussion, I am going to then come into the ellipse and this is where I could add a rubric to my discussion. I see a hand just went up. Feel free to unmute yourself, Afifa.
Paula, so I have a question. Whenever I'm working with faculty, when they're creating groups and discussions, since you're talking about discussions and groups, should I first make the groups and then go back to discussions, or should I first make the discussion and go back to groups, or it doesn't matter?
The groups have to be made first, because if I were to click that this was a group right now, I don't have any groups.
Oh, okay.
So you want to make the groups first.
Thanks.
So I hope that helped, Janice. Let me know if there's any more clarity that you want on creating a discussion. Let me see if I have any good examples of a discussion in my demo course. I don't know if I even have any good ones in here. Nah. But I can open up another one. I just want to show you how I always used to at least give them the prompt, the technical support. It's just good practice because then, they know exactly what they need to do. I'm just going like this one was one I used to do with a Canvas teacher course that I ran. But notice the prompt was right here. It was just to get to know you. So it was about your bucket list. Share one thing on your bucket list. What would you like to do? And then here are some mission details. These all link them directly to guides. So if they don't know how to do this the very first time, they could click here and see how to do specific things. But instead of just putting one little sentence with my question, because that's not really going to provoke a lot of thought, I like to have a prompt. I like to have guidelines. I like it to really be structured so my students know what to expect out of me. All right, I'm going to back up and I'm going to show how to make our groups so we can talk a little bit more about groups. So I'm going to go into the People tab. And when I come into the People tab, you'll see right here, I actually have two group sets right now. One's called Law 101 and the other one's called Project Groups. I'm going to first make my group set. And for this group set, I'm just going to call it Human Body Systems. This is where I get those options. Do I want to allow self sign up? Maybe I'm just going to create the groups later. I'm going to split the, that's strange, split the students by number of groups, split the students by per group. I'm just going to create groups later and show you what that looks like. So right now I'm under Human Body Systems. I don't have any students in this course, but I'll show you what it would look like. And I'm going to hit plus group. So this one might be the skeletal system. I cannot spell at all today. And then I can choose how many people I want in this group. So I'm going to say 4. And so now my group is made. I can make another group. And this is going to be the respiratory system. I'm going to put 4 people in this group as well. And I would just go through and keep adding groups to the group set titled the Human Body System. Now, these are drop downs. I don't have students in this course, but the students would all be listed right here. I can pick them up and drag them into the group that I want them to be in. And then if I max out at 4 and I decide, you know what, maybe Chad needs to be moved to this group because he doesn't really get along with this person, and I can move them around. I could also come in here and then I could edit or delete my group titles if I needed, but I can move students as needed. Remember, there was a self sign up. If I allow for self sign up, I must come back into the settings of my course and go into the navigation, and I must enable the People tab so that my students can get into it and put themselves into the group that they want to go into. Then what I do, I come back in here and I disable it. So you can't go in there and shuffle yourself around every single day. Once you put yourself in a group, you're done. And then I can edit them if needed. So in the People tab, first we make the group set. And then within the group set, we make our specific groups and we add our students to it. Now, within each of these groups, I am going to be able to go into them and I can make the collaboration. So I don't know, my courses aren't really set up, so they don't really work as I would want them to. So it's not going to allow for it. Sorry, but I could come in here and then I would create the collaboration within the group. Maybe it's a Word document, and then all the students in that group would have access to that document. When they are put into a group, you give me 2 seconds. I am going to go in real quick and find my old account and show you what that looks like. So notice right now, I'm not myself yet. I'm just looking for myself. And now I'm going to act as myself. I just want to show you where groups shows up so that you know, because when we were into pandemic mode, I had some primary teachers that thought that they could do their reading groups this way. Not really what groups in Canvas is used for, because what happens, notice that over here, the students get this group tab. Now, if a teacher doesn't realize that this is what was created when I made my groups, you're not going to know to come in here and look for them. So when I come into groups, I can see all the groups that I am a member of. So I could click on those group titles. And this is what I first showed you. Within a group, the students have almost a mini version of a Canvas course. They have home and announcements and pages and people and discussions, and this cannot be edited. So they kind of own their own little space. So they can do any of these things when they're in that space. They could come in and make a collaboration. So I'm clicking collaborations, plus collaboration. I'm going to do a PowerPoint. I can name it Demo PPT. These are the people in that group. If I hit save, now every single person in that group has access to this PowerPoint. As the teacher, I could go into each group and create it for them, or I could put the responsibility on the group leader, and that group leader can create it. This isn't going to work because I no longer have access to Office 365. But I just wanted to show you how groups ends up living in the global navigation. A couple other considerations with groups. They can be set up, like I just said, where I as the teacher create it, or we can have them do it. Some ideas on how to use this. I used to do it with projects, and my students would have a different group for each project that they were working on. You could use it as a group space for like discussions or communication throughout a semester. It could be used for PLC courses. I used to do that when I was working in the schools and I was 5th grade team leader. I had groups for PLCs where faculty members can then be part of groups and work together in their own group space. It's also a great place for any student-run organizations. I've seen it used with like National Honor Society and with like debate classes where they're put into groups and then they each have their own group space. Now, yes, this also takes facilitation. You are going to want to go into that group space and make sure that it's being utilized properly. You can engage in that group space. You can create a discussion. You can add a file for them. You can interact on their collaboration that you see them working on. But you also want to establish those parameters. How often are you going to check group work? Are you going to be a contributor to what they're doing? Are you going to be providing feedback for their group space? So it's not just going to be, I created a group, because they will run with that space if you are not monitoring it. So we want to know exactly what's going on in there. And like everything that we've discussed today, you want to make sure it's been planned out. You've created those norms. You've provided the guidance that they need. And yes, of course, that you are facilitating it. Otherwise, we know what could happen. Questions on anything that I just covered? We are coming to the end of our session. My last slide is resources. So you will have access to this slide deck. So you'll be able to access any of these guides as well. Questions on groups or collaborations or discussions, definitely dabble in them. Like I said, every time I learned a new tool, I wasn't real quick to jump at the use of it. But if there was something that I traditionally used to do in my classroom, then I was always thinking of how I can enable one of the new tools I learned with an old project that I used to run with my students. All right, if there aren't any questions. Well, thank you guys so much today for taking time out of your day to join me with collaborations inside of Canvas. I definitely challenge you to just dabble in one of them, try it out. And like I said, you expand upon it year after year and think of different ways that you can use the tools to get a specific task done. I'm going to stop the recording.